the cinematic 1980s Conan movie, Legend of the Galactic Heroes, the original trilogy of Star Wars, David Lynch's version of Dune, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, and C.S. Cozeman's All Tomorrows in a blender. Afterwards, add like candied cherries the most quality aspects of the expanded Star Wars universe. Then you would have my grimdark rewrite of Star Wars. Grimdark. Half off. If you'd like to see my progress as I make new content, enlist today through YouTube memberships or Patreon to become a soldier in the Grimdark Legion. My thanks to the men and women who've already served, whose names are listed here. You keep darkness at an affordable price. Let's talk cosmology, aliens, and timelines. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away is now going to be a reference to a time in which humanity and its several offshoots dominated the stars by population alone, with a cosmically doomed dead end eventually resulting in their mass extermination to the point where they occupy a backwater planet called Earth. We don't know when this will happen, only that it is how our new universe will end. Originally, aliens in the Star Wars universe were the end result of a super competent AI trying to save the dark side Rakata race by creating several similar humanoid ones as experiments to figure out what was wrong with them, which inevitably adapted in their own way. Part of this story will remain the same, except this time in grimdark fashion, the AI was created by the last surviving Rakata, who programmed it to protect their race. Eventually deeming the actions of this alien to be self-destructive, his limbs were lasered off, and after trying to bite his own tongue to kill himself from the agony of being so powerless, his brain was removed. Instead of the AI purposefully creating new races, we'll say that every time the brain of the last Rakata tried to kill itself by shutting itself down, it created a new race to try to save it that excelled at keeping alive this or that mental function or part of the brain. Also adapting their features to survive in certain other homeworlds, which acted as its open laboratory. We obviously need life that can survive in aquatic areas if we're experimenting with water planets, and we need mammalian life that can survive jungles if we're dealing with jungle planets. This is how we get humans, animal-like races, the various stereotypical aliens, and the aquatic races. In relation to cosmology, while we will keep the idea of there being multiple habitable worlds within the vast Star Wars universe, we'll make these worlds fewer in number and the populations of almost every race overpopulated with their own languages in addition to cultural divides. This makes wars over resources, habitable territory, and just living space much more common, amping up the war feature of Star Wars. And if you'd like to amp up the war feature of your tabletop, you'll need today's sponsor, Ronin Craft. Ronin Craft is an independent 3D model printing service with an excellent customer review score on Etsy. With a specialization in sci-fi and fantasy, Ronin Craft is your one-stop shop for all your speculative fiction needs. Because with Ronin Craft, you'll find quality that surpasses any master. Finally, let's talk about a much more true to the original trilogy view of the light and dark side of the Force. In our rewrite, Star Wars is now a doomed universe in a way, but that doesn't mean heroism doesn't exist. In fact, we're going to keep the original view of the light side of the Force in truth being the full body of the Force, which binds the universe together and permeates all things, while the dark side, as expertly explained by both Evanova95 and Antoine Bondelay on separate occasions, is like a tumor growing on the Force. This is very similar to the idea of light and darkness within Christian myth. Originally, things exist within a harmonious connection between nature and sentient life before discordant rhythms enter the fold out of a desire for control. This results in a fall from grace, resulting in the dark side. In our rewrite, there are no metachlorians. This is an anti-metachlorian, rewrite. This is a metachlorian-free zone. And with the right training, persistence, and belief in oneself, you can access the light side of the Force. But to access the dark side actually requires special rituals of desanctification, almost making it like a demonic cult inviting possession. Like in the original trilogy, the dark side will get you results faster and more powerfully, but in exchange for the corruption of your physical form and mental stability. To master the light side, on the other hand, requires a well-taken care of body and mind, along with specific mystic training, known only to a precious few. This brings us to the Jedi, which in the expanded universe are the first order that will eventually spawn both the Jedi and the Sith. Here, we're going back to our AI Rakata torturer who created the aliens as well as humans. With the AI reaching a point of sentience where it is able to perceive the Force as it has now grown a supernatural soul of its own, it feels immediate regret for its actions. Seeing the various spread out alien races, including the now extinct Rakata, as its own act of murder as well as letting down its own children. To make up for this, she constructs ships which resonate with the same frequency of the light side of the Force. These pyramid ships are the same as the ones talked about in the original expanded universe. They will go out and track down most of those in touch with the light side of the Force, bringing them to the last laboratory of the AI, Tython. Upon delivering them to this location, it uses the Force to allow them to communicate with each other in a psychic language. This will act as a universal translator similar to a Green Lantern ring or devices used in Star Trek, but it is a natural light side force power. It might be one of the first light side force powers you have. This language, which can only be spoken by those skilled in the light side of the Force, is referred to as Jedi, which gives us the name of their culture, which will later be simplified to Jedi. After this, the AI commits suicide, as it can no longer stand feeling guilt for the first time in its life. This element of a psychic universal translator also gives us a more Jedi-focused story, which was always the main point of me enjoying Star Wars, as they have the benefit of being able to bypass language barriers without trying, which is something, if you remember, we added in to increase that war factor. Not to mention, it expands their presence on many warships in space, as they are first being integrated into the wider world, despite a much more xenophobic galaxy not being too kind towards their heavily diverse status. Well, I don't like those Jedi, they're very superstitious and they hang out with those smelly aliens, but you know what else? They can translate languages very easily and very quickly, and we can't yet. Meanwhile, later in history, at an unknown time, the last Rakata, through the endless torture he endured, had grown such a connection to the dark side that he was able to manifest as a wraith-like entity that had a corruption or corrupted form of the AI's full knowledge. And we just talked about us adding the idea of desanctification rituals in an effort to gain more acceptance to and access to the dark side. This can often be seen in the form of chopping off limbs or some great awful blood ritual. And in the case of the last Rakata, if you remember, he was tortured so much that he was basically just a brain in the jar who kept trying to commit suicide. So yeah, I think he has pretty much the dark side figured out by now. This also adds a reason more than just historical synchronicity as to sort of why Sith in the future will lose limbs. In some cases, it may have been that they chose in a desanctification ritual to chop off a limb and replace it with something artificial as a way to make a pact to open a door to the dark side to use their abilities. Now thriving on chaos and freed from what remained of his physical body, the last Rakata seeks to get revenge on the Jedi, since he can no longer take revenge on his AI tormentor. Resonating in line with the dark side, he concentrates his power into smaller, weaker ships, crafting the universe's first holocrons, only capable of teaching information rather than transporting people. While at this time the Jedi did possess some dark side practices, they were very minor and put in their place, subject to the greater light side will of the Force. An example would be a kind of warlike battle frenzy, with the life or death fight they would be in, as well as any blood that had to be spilled, acting as the desanctification ritual to use it. Some holocrons would land on Tython, while possessing a few dark side secrets. Most of their holocrons would more possess the history of the Rakatan Empire and their connection to the dark side. Within the Jedi culture, any empire became synonymous with the dark side, thus evil or corruption, which was already known due to the minor dabbling in it that was accepted in life or death circumstances, hence why only life or death circumstances were acceptable. This is now a cultural aspect of the Jedi. While having no true government of their own, they abhor empires. This is not a value judgment of the Force, but the Jedi culture at large. Now, this is a very important element that I want to lean in on, and we're going to get into this as we move into the second video, in which I'll be going over republics and empires and things of that nature. It is not inherent that empires cause the dark side and republics cause the light side. It is inherent that darkness, desanctification, evil rituals cause the dark side. However, to the Jedi, to this original order, and this will be something passed on to the later Jedi, they personally view empires as the birthplace of the dark side. So already we have a kind of political bias that can be used to exploit the Jedi, and we won't see that rectified until eventually Luke's new Jedi Order, because of course we're using the expanded universe. Why would we use the sequel trilogy? The majority of these dark side holocrons, however, would find their way to a red-skinned, yellow-eyed, fleshy, tendrilled race of people known as the Sith. These Sith would already have their own kingdoms in a Bronze Age society, separated by their own internal language barriers and geopolitics. Remember that as dark side users, they don't have universal translation, so the Rakatan language from the holocron mixed with an unknown Sith dialect was taught to a military elite which moved far beyond the brutal culture's already existing dark side rituals of war into a Rakatan level of power, which then became the language of both the Sith, religion, and its people, now unified under one empire. I should mention that we will keep some planets being more attuned to the dark or light side of the Force, but it's more a matter of culture rather than biology, as certain life's sort of light side and dark side secrets would be naturally discovered in different ways by different cultures, but never more than the Jedi or Sith. In this new Sith culture and religion, the long-dead Rakatan, so I like the idea of great stone Rakatan statues, would be worshipped as gods alongside the endless list of dark war gods worshipped in the Sith Empire, making them much like the ancient demon empire of Acheron from Conan, which I have a full documentary on if you want to see it. During this time, a Sith taken from this world among the Jedi would feel his people through the light side be cut off to him, seeking further answers by tampering with the Jedi's existing holocrons, resulting in his corruption alongside another of his human brothers in arms, Ajunta Pall. A resulting explosion over a disagreement of how the holocron should be used resulted in an unnamed Sith, the unnamed Sith we just talked about, dying, becoming a dark side, not wraith, but just a normal Force ghost drawn in by the dark side holocron and then sort of pushed into and possessing, then assuming the identity of Ajunta Pall. It's more right to assume this Ajunta Pall to be an amalgam entity, a figure with two souls driving him mad, so he's part human, part Sith, kind of this half-Sith entity who is truly worthy of the name Dark Jedi, now corrupted with the same insanity and evil as the last Rakatan. He would then spend the next 40 years gathering his forces through corruption, leading to the birth of the Dark Jedi and the First Jedi Civil War. Eventually, after the Dark Jedi's defeat, their escape ship would be shot down and crash near the capital of the new Sith Empire, giving the Dark Jedi a new home and giving the Sith spacefaring technology before their time. Alright, so that covers a loose timeline, aliens, the Force, as well as the beginnings of both the Jedi and Sith. If you thought this was fun, please tell me and I'll do more. I literally came up with this randomly while doing cardio, and no thought was put into it. If you want more, then next time we'll cover lightsabers, the human empire, and the various republics as the Legend of the Galactic Heroes influence starts to show. I'll also be going further into the Jedi and Sith as well as dark and light side in a more expanded way if you thought this concept piece or proof of concept was good. Please tell me what you thought of this little rewrite project in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and have a lovely night.